Good evening and welcome back to week 3 of Kaplan's Radical American Judaism. As you know, we have one more week. Next week is going to be Kaplan and the Problem of Evil. And it's going to be, that evening is going to be topped off with Ed Tobin talking about why I love being a Reconstructionist Jew. So, there we go for next week. Next week also, we will be passing out the t-shirts if you've been to all 4, so be sure to hang around for that. And tonight we have Priscilla Press, who's speaking on Kaplan, his theology, and the importance of salvation. Priscilla does not mind questions during her talk, so feel free to raise your hand at any time if you want to ask a question or make a comment, correct?
And there will be a few times when I actually ask for comments.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I was encouraged to tell you how I became a Reconstructionist.
Is the microphone on?
You have to.
Just not okay.
Point it right at your face.
I was encouraged. Is this good? I was. No? Okay.
It's fine. It's good.
Think of it like an ice cream
Talk a little
cone.
louder.
Yeah.
Just don't lick it.
Don't look at you.
Don't lick it.
Don't lick it. No, I'm not licking it. Okay. So, I am a Reconstructionist. I'm very happy to be. Go. See, how can I make eye contact?
Hold it in your hand.
Yeah, then I can. Okay. I don't have any experience doing this before in my whole life. Okay. I became a Jew really by immersion. My late husband, Joel Ehrlich, came from a conservative toward the modern Orthodox kosher home that had a large extended group of family and friends. So I was immersed in that, much to his father's dismay. And Joel did fundraising in New York City for major Jewish organizations like the Jewish Theological Seminary and the Technion. And so through those organizations, I was around a little bit older, maybe 10 years older than we were at the time, which we were pretty young, left-wing, non-observant Jews. So I had quite a tasting of. So then when we moved to Colorado, we lived in the mountains above Boulder, and we went to Har Hashem because we had a friend there for 20 years. And I basically became Jewish. And then when a new rabbi, Deborah Bronstein, came on the scene, Joel was talking to her, and he told her that I wanted to convert, but I didn't believe in God. And so she said that, oh, is this better if I'm really close like that?
Yes.
She said, oh, there are many Jews that don't believe in God. And coincidentally, I was painting at the Art Students League, and I met Ed Tobin. And he gave me the little blue book, which I actually don't know the name of. It's this little book that they used to give out in the old days here a lot. I opened it to the concept of God, read it, and cried, because it was really what I believe. And so I feel very at home here. This will be my 20th anniversary this year in June of being a Jew. Shauna Morgan Sherman and I both went to the Beit Din at the same time. So I'm very happy to be a Jew. I'm very happy to be a Reconstructionist, and I'm happy here at B'nai HaPorat.
You lower the microphone a little bit.
Might be easier.
You won't have to stretch.
Okay. Okay, let's see how that works. Okay, Kaplan said, God is the power that makes for salvation. One sentence, and we already have 2 lightning rod words, God and salvation. I'm going to be talking about the ideas of in 2 chapters of the Mel Sculp book, where he deals with salvation. Salvation was a very important concept for Kaplan, a fluid one that changed throughout his life. It didn't necessarily change in a linear way, but as he matured, he was constantly reevaluating his theology and his ideas about the definition of salvation. For a long time, his term for salvation was growth, which is pretty interesting. Later, it became life abundant. One of his few but joyous expressions. Salvation is often considered a Christian word, but for Kaplan, who interpreted God in a more naturalistic way, salvation is the individual's responsibility to find meaning in life through learning what to live for and becoming fully human. This makes a lot of sense to me. Sometimes Kaplan explains salvation and individualism as making the most out of life, or permitting every human being to, oh, there you are, Rabbi, over there. Permitting every human being to attain the maximum of which he is capable. I think this is a very important concept. He adds that that is within the support of the community. And this is one of Kaplan's big things, that it's the participation of the group that's also very important. He talks in this book, in these chapters, about individualism and the individual, but always within the group, be that our community here at B'nai, your own family, the neighborhood, the city, the country. This is how Kaplan is defining salvation. I hope, does this make sense to people?
Yeah.
Okay. Fulfilling one's potential. The idea of reaching our potential brings up questions. What is each of our potential? And how are we going to go about reaching it? How is our potential enhanced or restricted by our parents, our environment, or by our schooling? Fulfilling one's potential. Consider how this changes through life. When we're young, many of us are goal-directed. By virtue of simply learning to navigate the world, we're acquiring skills to be able to live. When we're raising children, our adult goals may change, be enhanced, or be interrupted. When we're older still, do we still continue to have goals? Are we engaged? I know when I turned 70, I got slightly freaked out about goals because I had always been goal-directed. In my teens, my goals led me to nursing school to be able to support myself. And then when I went to New York City to work, I attended City College of New York, which is where Kaplan went. But when Kaplan went there, it was like Harvard. When I went there, it was not, they were having riots, so it was not exactly the same thing. But it was free, which was, I think they're going back to that now in New York, so it's really nice. It was a wonderful thing to be able to go to school free. So I had specific goals, and that was very comforting. I knew what I wanted to do. And so what do goals mean to me at 72? My goals now include keeping my body functioning so I can do the things I want to do, having a warm and peaceful relationship with my significant other, my family, my friends, my community, all of you. I try to keep learning. The study group has been a wonderful experience for me. I go to a book club. I want to get studying Spanish back into my life, which has sort of always been there. We have people in retirement here. Do you have goals? How have they changed? Anybody? Might need to think about it for a few minutes. Edward?
Well, it's always a goal just to be able to get out of bed in the morning.
Get up
And
in
then
the morning.
Bobby has a friend who's retired. His goal which takes him a day to accomplish, is to get gas in his car.
I'm sorry, I can't see your little, oh, Jamie?
No,
No,
Bobby.
Bobby. Sorry.
My grandson died almost 6 years ago, and he overdosed. And after that, my goal became to find out as much as I could about addiction. And that's one goal that I have,
Right,
that I've been doing.
great. Felice?
Well, I took on what my husband calls a retirement career in music therapy. I went back to school and I got certified, and I have a part-time private practice in my semi-retirement. But what I envision as a goal is that as I ease out of actual, physical practice, that I can continue to advocate for this profession that I've gone into in my later years. So
Wow.
that's one of my goals.
Yeah. Yes.
So I was a career working woman, and I had goals in terms of rising up the ladder, you could say, at work. But then now everything's changed because A, I'm retired, and B, I now have a granddaughter. So
Right.
my whole life is devoted to family. I'm helping my parents and my husband's parents with their needs. So it's now kind of a more caregiving type of life, which is totally different from what it was even a year ago, so.
Wow.
Me too.
Anybody else? Art or Janet? Either of you want anything about goals and how they've changed? Not yet, okay. Anybody else? Now, this is really interesting. We are actually a relatively older group tonight. Mature, yes, that's right. Jill?
So, for some of my goals, I write them down and then I sneer at them because they mean achievement, focus, and hard work, which I don't want to do anymore. So they're around passions. My goal in the next 24 hours is to find out the contradictory reasons why the snowy owls are coming to Denver and their relationship to lemmings. I don't think the article was sufficient, and why more lemmings in the Arctic means more snowy owls here. So that's my passion today. In my 75th year, I've become a hedonist. So tomorrow, my thing may just be getting out of the car without tearing my clothes.
Jamie, you're slightly younger. Anything about goals? How in your life, how they've changed?
My goal is to retire. That is my focus.
To retire?
Yeah.
Retire.
Where's the mic? Can
It's
we
right
please
there.
There's
use
a pass.
music because not everybody can hear well,
Yeah,
and then we don't pick it up either on the video. Thanks.
okay.
Are you finished?
I know, it's cumbersome.
Well, in some ways, I'm trying to figure out what my goals for this last piece of my life is, And, one of them is just to keep my body functioning and, have a good time, being able to do it. But there are two other things that have come up for me. One is, really trying to figure out how I can contribute to to grow and to maintain a sense of democracy and well-being in this political climate. And really trying to, making that every day, doing something that does that.
Right.
And my other goal is to really carve out time to practice creativity, whether it's writing or doing some artwork or whatever. It's like, if not now, when? I've spent my life working and raising a family and being responsible for all that, but so to carve out some of that spiritual creation time for myself.
Great.
I
Yes,
have-
Bobby. And
When I heard her speaking, I thought of my other goal.
there's your mic.
Oh,
Bobby.
yeah, Bobby.
No, you.
No.
Okay, there's two Bobbies. Okay, when I heard you speak, I just reminded me of what I'm doing now. You know, my goal became, because of the political climate, to know my Muslim sisters. And so I started a group called Shalom Salam Sisterhood. And it's just been fantastic to know others who I did not grow up with. You hear all these horrible things. So I think that's probably the last goal I'm gonna have. You know, I'm 87, so, you know, let's be realistic about life. I don't know how long I'm gonna live, but at least
But that's a big goal.
a couple of things that, yeah, really have.
Anybody else? You can turn that off while we're not using it. Like that? No.
I'm goal-free.
Do we have a test for that?
Let's look at these terms that Kaplan uses to define salvation. We have peace. It's not easy to feel peace in our current situation, as Bobby was saying. Kaplan felt the need to define salvation and explain how it worked in the world. In Hebrew, salvation is Yeshua. But Kaplan defines salvation as shalom, peace. He says God's essence is peace. For Kaplan, the purpose of religion is to achieve salvation. It is the goal of life and gives meaning to our existence. Self-actualization is the method and the goal. So that's really interesting if you think about it. I mean, it's both the method and the goal. So we each have our potential. And what Kaplan wants us to do is to better ourselves, grow, be fully human, be our best selves. And we renew our vows to keep growing on Yom Kippur every year. It seems like a pretty good system to me. Kaplan said, be yourself is the teaching of religion. Is this what you usually think of as the teaching of religion? Zusha's story that says exactly that. Before his death, Rabbi Zusha said, in the coming world they will not ask me, were you not Moses? I think, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zusha? So, Kaplan is onto something. The humble and unassuming Zusha affirms for us that the sin we should truly regret is our failure to use our talents and time to be our best selves for our families, our communities, and the world. We've talked about the words Kaplan uses for salvation or wholeness. Next, we have the concept of perfection, which if you look at your little handouts is kind of the second part. It's kind of the how do you get there.
So I have a question about salvation.
Yes.
Before you move on.
Okay.
It's on.
The definition you said in Hebrew was Yeshua,
I thought it was Yeshua, but yeah.
as in a name, a proper noun? Because that's the word used by Christian theologians and writers.
Yeshu.
Well, what's
Yeshu
Yeshua?
is Jesus, is that what
What's it? No, that is how it's meant to be translated, if that's what you meant, is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's what
That's the word in
Skull
Hebrew?
tells us.
Sorry, that's what it said there in,
Yeah, Skull tells us, let me go back.
The word is Yeshua, and it's
Yes.
a proper Hebrew word.
the name for Joshua, you mean?
No,
No,
it's Y.
that's something else, that's
The-
Yeshua.
The
Yeah.
Yeshua is a, okay, I
It's
don't,
Jesus.
yeah, I understand, but I don't think that's a Hebrew word. I think that's the name that people who speak, okay, well, I don't mean to, I'm curious
Skulls
about.
told us that.
Yeah, Skull tells us, and
What's
I think
that?
Eli is over
Okay,
here.
I'm
and
sorry,
he's
I
saying-
am not schooled in that, so I apologize. I
That's
have
okay.
to read more.
That's okay.
I have something actually I wanted to say about
Just a minute, Jamie.
Okay. What do they do? We have to have runners here, or handers.
I had something I wanted to say about be yourself. What brought to mind was your essence. You know, when you're born, you have this essence that gets chipped away at, or layers of mud get covered because of everything that we deal with. But it is your true self that is your essence that is closest to God.
Mhm. Say that a little louder, Lori. What?
Is this too close?
No,
No, it's
no.
Okay, no, when you said it's, your essence is closest to God, and I was just trying to say, or it is God, in the sense of all essence being connected to each other. Is that?
Great, just turn it off in between. Okay, so we're talking about perfection. In the Talmud, the idea of perfection, shlemut, alludes to the service of God through mitzvot. For Maimonides, reason and mitzvot lead to perfection, moral and intellectual perfection. Moral and intellectual perfection to Maimonides are the goal of life. For Kaplan, perfection is always a moral category. Shlemut, though, has a definition other than perfection, wholeness. And it comes from the same root as shalom. So where Skalt, or maybe Kaplan, may use the word perfection, I prefer to use wholeness or fulfillment. We're never going to be perfect, and we know it. But it also evokes negative connotations for some of us. But to aspire to be whole is not as, doesn't seem as far away. Morality as a means to wholeness. To achieve wholeness, we are obligated to look within. The practice of musar was and is a rigorous practice done in a group where you look at moral issues and you look into yourself, you look within, and then the other people in the group confront you on how you're living your life, basically. And the rabbi is giving a class in this, learning about it, which some of us have already taken once, and I encourage you to take it. It's very interesting learning about it. But here in our community at B'nai, we have many, I feel like I have many role models in each other to be able to see how to stay on what you would consider to be a righteous path. Growth or becoming as a means to wholeness. Wholeness also implies transcendence, growth, change, choice. We are in a constant state of becoming. According to Kaplan, our obligation is to develop ourselves fully through vocation, progeny, and the utilization of excess. in play, art, and worship. Kaplan said this. The utilization of excess. This is perhaps one of the most joyous statements, that you hear from Kaplan. When I first read this, the utilization of excess, I thought of this large group of all-male people dancing when my father-in-law gave a Torah to a place in Lakewood, New Jersey. Some of you may be familiar what the place is. I can't remember what the name of it is now. It was a big center. But that's, so Kaplan keeps this thread for us from the past, pulling that kind of thing. But how are we to interpret this in our lives? So we have our work, our kids, having fun, participating in the arts, whether it is appreciating art or making art, and whatever ways we join together to experience our Judaism. Abraham Joshua Heschel said, "Live your life as if it were a work of art." It's a very beautiful statement. Any thoughts, any comments about the stuff that I've been talking about? Growth, change. What is our little thing here? Art. Oh, let's get Art
The talking stick.
I can talk loud enough.
No, you can't.
It's
It's probably on.
It should be on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, the one word we haven't heard anything about is Jew. So far, we've been talking about things that apply equally to neighbors, friends, Christians, Muslims, black, white, purple. Why, in other words, is salvation for a Jew any different than salvation for anybody else?
Well, the idea of salvation, I think, in a Christian way, is different, because what you're doing, for us, I think the means are the end. But in trying, the other means are a means to get to heaven.
That's old-fashioned Christians. Most Christians don't do that.
Okay.
Any more than old-fashioned Jews and old-fashioned Christians have more in common than modern Christians and modern Jews.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, that's all.
Anybody else want to respond to that?
I'll respond using some words out of the book. Because Ed was good enough to pull up some quotes about salvation from the book,
Right.
which I happen to have here. And this is one, and this goes directly to what Art just said. It says, "We cannot hope to succeed as human beings. We cannot hope to find individual salvation unless we understand that all people have the right to a life that is complete, that is full, and that we must strive not only for our own rights, but for the rights and the dignity of the other." So what you said, salvation in Kaplan's view isn't just for the Jews, it's for everybody.
Anybody else?
And I'm not sure this is especially Jewish, but salvation, Kaplan talks about salvation, if we listen to him, coming in this world. His view of Judaism and living the righteous life is to achieve fulfillment in this world.
Right.
And so, I've always felt that that was a very Jewish expression of how we should live our lives.
Yeah.
When I was, I always thought when I was, from the time I paid attention, 10, 11, 12 to religion and synagogue and the community, the Jewish community, I always thought that that was the whole point of religion, as you had said earlier. This kind of being fulfilled, having a life that where you've discovered what to live for, access and an ability to deal with the things that in life really matter, the relationships you have, how to have get along in the in a family, how to get what to be open, to be learning. There's so many things about that kind of growth and that kind of so I always thought that's what religion was for. And I also thought it was about the truth. And when I heard that I had to, at some point I just could not believe I was supposed to believe things that are obviously not true historically. And the notion of God as a supernatural power that thinks and talks and acts like a person, that just never made sense. And so I've always thought the Reconstructionist view was the one that fit the most what I thought everybody was saying in religion, certainly in Christianity and in Judaism, as I had heard, on television and every other place. So that's how I think of it as a very much a Jewish idea. For me to be Jewish is for me to try to find those things, and looking for them in the Jewish culture and the Jewish writings is kind of a faith that I seem to have.
Right.
I'll give it to you in a second. I just wanted to throw in that I think he did have a notion that halacha might be, or at least some elements of halacha, a Jewish path to achieve these ends. Not the exclusive path, but our path.
Right.
So with regard to your mention of Musar,
right,
you can go on Amazon and buy Kaplan's translation of a foundational Musar text, which is Mesilat Yesharim, the path of the straight, but the path of the righteous, you could say, the path of the just. So he really was immersed in that.
I know when I was growing up, looking at my family and how they viewed Judaism and how they viewed being devout, it didn't stick with me. I mean, I didn't fit. But whatever life I've made, this place makes me feel like I can fit. But well, interestingly enough, my husband, who is not Jewish, but who has lived a very Jewish life since we've been together, and we raised our kids Jewish, and he participates more in synagogue life than many, many Jews do. We were visiting some cousins of ours who are the other end of the spectrum. They're super, super ultra-Orthodox. But when he said, well, I can't convert because I don't believe, their first comment was, no, first you do. Then you may believe. But,
really?
Yeah, which I thought was fascinating because, of the life that they lead compared to ours. Yeah.
Okay, wait for the mic, Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah, but we couldn't hear you.
But that's a biblical thing, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will first do, and then we will listen or hear or understand, however you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need a little runner.
You've got a big runner.
Well, Pat is it.
You'll be less big after you run all night.
Barbara.
Some of this discussion about what's Jewish and what's not Jewish in a way, I had a very seminal experience, a life-changing experience. My son wanted to have a bar mitzvah. I don't know where that came from, but he did. And I joined a synagogue, and to be perfectly frank, I was just looking for the carpool, that everybody that I knew belonged to this, who belonged to a synagogue, belonged to this conservative synagogue. And I made the kids go to high holiday services with me that year. And in the middle of the services, from a very feelingful place, I went, oh my God, I don't know if I'm a Jew. So I paid my dues. I got to go see the rabbi, who he didn't know from a hole in the wall, nor did he know me. But I walked into his study and I just started to weep. And he was the most loving, accepting person who, he said, well, if you think you're having an identity crisis, my family were Orthodox rabbis back to the Baal Shem Tov. And he taught me a lot about, that people have different, shaped souls, so based on experience and of what it is that we want. But the Jewish path was a path, not the only path. And that since I've been more connected to, I've been part of an Abrahamic Initiative dinner group for like 15 years. And have learned that when you peel away the ritual or the path, there's some differences. There certainly are about ritual, what we've been taught, what the thing. But when you peel everything away, all three of those religions are, they want the same thing. They're looking for the same thing, which is a righteous life, which is all the things that you're talking about. And, thank you, Priscilla, because, I've always heard that expression, Kaplan's, God is everything that brings forth salvation, but I had no idea what that salvation actually meant.
Yeah, all these very common but excellent goals.
Yeah, and, I say to people, I belong to a synagogue where at least half the people are atheists, But it's more than that. It's about the tribe. It's about culture. It's about how to live a righteous life. It's all of those things. And it means a little different to different people, like how you do it. But the basic tenet is very cohesive.
Thank you. Adina.
But in Judaism, as in the other religions, there's not one Judaism. Eli and I spent this weekend at a funeral of my brother-in-law in Florida, and one of his grandsons has become ultra-Orthodox, and so there's not just, and by the way, it's the same in Christianity. You have Mike Pence, who really cares about the fetus. Mm-hmm. But once the fetus is born, you don't have to give any support to anything.
Right.
And who I think really does believe in old-fashioned, you go to hell if you're not in his thing. You have two, very warm, humanistic Christians. You have Quakers, you have, so it's not, we can't talk about what is Jewish, because there are different kinds, unless we believe we had a pope who, and by the way, my great nephew who does, in effect, believe his Rebbe is the pope, had to get special permission, it was on Shabbos that my brother-in-law died, to walk to the hospital to be with his dying father, because it was not an eruv. And he had to get special permission, and he got special permission to answer his cell phone when his sister, who was willing to break that much, was willing to drive to the hospital. So you have every different kind, and sometimes, as in my family, all in one family.
I'll say my piece. Throughout our lives, we've at various times belonged to a conservative congregation, a Reformed congregation, and the shul that my parents didn't belong to was Orthodox.
Right.
In other words, they lived in New York, and
There's always the shul you
in New
belong to
York,
and the one you don't
the city
go
was
to.
the shul. essentially. All right. And here we are. My own background is one that is strongly based in Hebrew, the Hebrew language, Hebrew literature, and of course the scriptures, the prophets, etc. My parents' religion was labor Zionism, in effect. But so how do I approach the idea of what makes me Jewish? First of all, the prophet Micha has one sentence which summarizes a lot. He asks the question, what does God want of you? And the answer is, asot mishpat, to do justly, behave fairly, va'avat chesed, and the love of loving kindness, v'hatznei alechet, and walk humbly. And it says, it's really hatznei alechet lifnei Elohecha, before your God. I never knew who my God was, but hatznei alechet was important for me. And I think that my attitude toward the questions that we have here is saying, yes, a lot of people have the same issues and deal with it in similar ways. But my approach is through what I've learned in through the use of the Hebrew language and the literature that it is written in. And so, and you know, does it matter that I'm in a Reconstructionist congregation? Not all that much. I can participate in the services, etc. I know the Siddur. I know 3 different versions of the Siddur. But the important things, as I said, asot mishpat, va'avat chesed, v'hatznei alechet.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So we're just about to talk about change as a means to wholeness. Everything we're talking about involves personal action. Changes the way we grow as human beings. Have I said this already?
No.
No. Change is layered, subtle, nonlinear. When we decide to make a change, we still have to adapt to and face uncomfortable feelings, even if it's a welcome change, even if it's a good one. But sometimes change comes unexpectedly, or sometimes change is unwelcome. But we must face it. Some people have more ability to change than others. Others have a hard time with change, even with small things. The old melodies to the prayers we sing in services, some of us miss them, cling to them. According to Kaplan, we change them as long as they serve the same purpose they originally did. I think of Kaplan's excess in worship. We want joy and poignancy in those songs. Change can also be an opportunity. It's like a blank canvas with many possibilities. If change is a means to fulfillment or wholeness, we are obligated to work toward change. The idea of choice. Of course, the path to change is filled with choices. As children, our choices are guided and limited by our parents' judgment. As we get older, we have more experiences that help us with change, with choices, And hopefully, we make them with more maturity. Choices confront us all our lives, especially in retirement. Change can feel like a blank canvas, a real challenge. Since we've been talking about Jewish and Reconstructionist ideals, how do you think your Judaism or your Reconstructionism has affected your choices and your journey toward growth? We have been already talking a little bit about this, I think. But does anybody want to add something? think we've been talking about it a little bit already. I personally see incredible examples in this community all the time that challenged me to engage in repairing the world, and it's really quite a gift. This is a prime example of Kaplan's belief in community, that the community exists for the purpose of supporting the individual in the quest for wholeness. We are presented with a myriad of opportunities through B'nai Havara to find fulfillment and wholeness through mitzvot, joyful worship, and community service. We've spoken at length about the coming of age of Reconstructionism coinciding with the immigrant experience in America during the Progressive Era. The 20th century understanding of equality in the US was very important to Kaplan. In the United States at that time, Kaplan felt that we were in an environment that could nurture us in achieving wholeness. With the proper attitude toward authority, the rule of law, and pluralism, democratic individualism could help us both achieve fulfillment and a more just world. This higher type of individualism could encourage Jews to assert the value of their ethnic identity, as opposed to those who opted for the melting pot of general American culture. A number of the other people that have spoken have talked about this. Kaplan was trying to find a way for Jews to stay Jews and to stay Jewish while embracing all that this country has to give us, and especially at that time, which was a very hopeful time. America's foundational rights for Kaplan entail the duty of society to provide every human being, and this is so apropos at our time now, with the opportunities to make the most of their life and achieve fulfillment. I don't know if you have any other comments, Pat?
I think I have two. One is that Kaplan really emphasized his idea of democratic individualism. And by that he meant that unbridled individualism would be the antithesis of Jewish ideas. Right. That an individualism that says, I get to do whatever I want without boundaries, no matter what, no matter who's around, no matter what the consequences to others, was not a useful kind of individualism, wasn't democratic, and certainly wasn't Jewish. So he did come to believe, though, that in his view, democracy and Judaism were pretty close to the same thing, which historically may be an incredible thought, how he got there. But he really persuaded him of that, and this is from the book, so I'm going to read it. He was asked if he could reduce in this context of democracy and Judaism, if he could reduce the Bible to just one verse. And often that's love thy neighbor as thyself. That's an automatic sort of response. He said, from Zechariah, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And he explains that by that he means what he views as a very Jewish idea of not valorizing power for its own sake, of not worshiping might because it's might, but of finding that inner spirit that he talks about and developing that, and using power for something.
Great, thank you. So we're no longer in that optimistic period in which Kaplan worked out his primary thoughts, and not surprisingly, all aspects of our community life need periodic re-evaluating. Kaplan's notion of reconstruction asks us to use practices to ensure that the ritual or whatever serves the same function it did in the past, but Always we want a fresh and exciting Judaism. He wants us to keep on working toward that goal. The mitzvah system must be reinterpreted in terms of modern concept. This is one of the basics of Reconstructionism. When considering a particular ritual, we look to the function in the past. For instance, Kaplan believed in doing away with the ancient distinctions between priest, Levite, and the great mass of the people of Israel. Eliminating these distinctions would have meant dispensing with the privileged access that the descendants of the priestly class have to honors in the synagogue and blessing the congregation. He saw these distinctions as rooted in ancient racial distinctions and contradicting the 20th century ideas of equality. Are any of you Kohanim?
Yes.
And so how do you feel about Kaplan's ideas?
Well,
About this?
that's, I think that's, I'm going to say something provocative.
Oh, that's fine.
No.
I think we have others here who would say the same.
That's it would be very comfortable for somebody who is a Christian theologian and to say that that is not far from what Jesus is credited with having said. I will tell you, as a Kohen, it's not really necessarily true, right? I mean, it's supposed to be a patrilineal descendancy so long as the mothers were part of the tribe and had not, and there's a lot of requirements. But the reality is, there's nothing I get. I'm not entitled to anything. Nothing. Even in an Orthodox synagogue. In a very Orthodox synagogue, when they know that I'm a Kohen, which, you know, they can't verify it, it's just I'm telling them, right? Yes, I would be then accepted to do that blessing, to do the blessing. But the blessing is not intended to be an act of mine, not as an individual, not as a member of that tribe. It is to be a conduit, a place for a mark, an opportunity to say that blessing. Blessing is said in every Jewish liturgy of every kind. It's said also in Christianity and in Catholicism. So the idea that a person can bless somebody is not a personal right. In fact, people bless each other all the time. I know the rabbi does all the time. And it is an act of language, an act of the things that Eli said. So that's how I relate to it. And thank you for asking.
There were also some restrictions to Kohanim. Armin Cohen, who was the rabbi of the Park Synagogue in Cleveland, defied those because he wants to be able to participate and be paid for participation in funerals. And a Kohen is not supposed to be around dead bodies. So I don't know that his interest in that was because he wanted to get rid of the class system, or he really did want to have that part of his income. So they're all
No matter.
You know, in Jerusalem, near any cemetery, there's in Israel, there's a path that's called Mutar La Kohanim. This is a road that a Kohen may go. You're not that close to a grave. So, you know, there are all different ways, but in terms of, I mean, you know, it's not such a startling concept for many, even conservative, because Armin Cohen studied at the Jewish Theological Seminary, as did the Kaplan.
Why don't you hand it to Lori Cohen?
Hello. No, mine's really simple because our house was, when I grew up, my father was not religious, but he did always point out that we were Kohanim. Okay, that was something that he was proud of, even though he was not religious, and he kind of passed that on to me, like, well, I should be proud of this. And then thinking about it more, to me, it's really just a lineage kind of thing. It's really doesn't have anything to do, I guess, not much to do with religion, which is just, if somehow I can somehow trace, if I'm female, so, but anyway, if somehow I can trace back to people who were really important to us thousands of years ago, that feels good. It's like a connection thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a connection, lineage, ancestry feeling for me. And I like that feeling.
Yeah. Send it back. We have more of them. Edward.
You reach it?
Yes.
You're an excellent runner.
So my family are Levites, and that's always fascinated me. First of all, you all understand I'm a fervent Reconstructionist, okay? And if Kaplan says that it's best that we erase all of these caste separations in our people, then I go along with that. But I love being a Levite, okay? I mean, I love thinking if it's true, all right, and that somehow the thread in my family goes all the way back to the tribe of Levi. That's amazing. I mean, that's really interesting. That's the kind of connection that I want to get out of being Jewish, out of these deep connections. And I've told my kids, my daughters especially, that we are Levites. And I expect you to tell your kids, your daughters also, that they are Levites, and we're connected. We're connected through all of that time and turmoil and displacement and exile and everything, back to that far. And for me, it's a good thing, But as a matter of fact, the great mass of the Israelites, trace that back too. It's a fabulous thing, I mean, we're all really in the same boat.
Anybody else?
When you talked about how you were Am Yisrael, you were just ordinary, it didn't matter, and where was your connection? I'm also Am Yisrael, one of the people. And I didn't really feel that connection because I was born in America and I grew up seeing the land where my fathers died, and I know damn well that my forefathers. And it was when I was in Israel, and not the first time, because the first time the wall was closed off. The second time we were there was after '67, and we could go. And I realized that someone related to me had been there because all Jews 3 times a year, at least the males, had to come to Jerusalem to pay taxes. And that was the first time I felt that I had any forebears other than my grandparents, who certainly were not part of this country, and they didn't ever feel part of Russia or Poland, where they were from. So you don't have to be a Levi or a Kohen to feel that kind of connection. Where are you? But I understand that feeling. I mean, it's like those castes right now are like the dead white men of our society. Yeah.
Dear Gloria had one more comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Pat.
I forgot.
Oh, you forgot it? Sorry. Back to Pat.
Wants to go back.
I like to think we're of the 13th tribe of Dinah, and I think it means judgment.
Art?
I go back far enough to remember the occasion when Rabbi Kaplan in person was in Denver. I don't know, maybe Ed remembers. Do you? Maybe I'm the only one.
No.
You're my assistant. Anyway, there was a funny exchange. The conversation was pretty much like what we're having right here. Kaplan led the discussion, and I can still picture the guy. He's a little guy. He looks like a tailor. He was not a prepossessing figure. But anyway, very smart. So this discussion was going on, and finally somebody stands up and asks him a question. He says, Rabbi Kaplan, I have a question. You told me all your views. You say you're a rabbi. Rabbi, do you daven? He says, of course I daven. I'm a rabbi. That was the end of the discussion.
Yeah, this is the Kaplan we know in this book, for sure. Okay, so we're just going to talk a little bit about the Sabbath in relation to some of these other ideas. For traditional Jews, the Sabbath is the most holy day outside of Yom Kippur. It is a taste of the world to come, which would be like the Garden of Eden, perfect as God made it. But for Kaplan, the emphasis is not so much on the events of creation, but on creativity itself. Kaplan was far more concerned with what was happening right here, right now. The Sabbath has both personal and social aspects. Kaplan identifies the means to wholeness with the notion of integration. The pursuit of an integrated personality, though not discussed by other Jewish thinkers, is in fact how we find meaning in the Sabbath. He explains integration in terms of needs. We have our physical needs of sustenance, health, diversion, sexuality, our psychological needs of love, cooperation, help, influence, and we have our spiritual needs. Some of these words that are coming from Skuld. Selfhood, humanity, godhood, control of aggression. The ideal is to integrate these levels in an organic way so that each has its appropriate place, but one doesn't dominate over the others. It's quite a juggling act. On Shabbat, as we step back from the demands of the world, we are not asked to make any of the moral or ethical compromises that are necessary to keep the world going. On the Sabbath, we simply are. The peace that we experience on the Sabbath provides a respite from the striving for wholeness that we're doing during the rest of the week. Indeed, the Sabbath is built around integration. The Sabbath comes at a natural end of most of our work week, except nursing, actually, and things like that. We step back from politics, electronics, we light the candles, we bless the children. By eating a good meal and resting and making love to the person who we love, we fulfill our basic needs. By being with our family and our community, we fulfill our psychological needs. And we study and worship, thus fulfilling our spiritual needs. And perhaps because we are not working and thus more rested, we may treat people more decently, our ethical needs. We are guided by these tools we've been talking about and the tremendous intellect, humanity, and persistence of Mordecai Kaplan. And I am grateful for this profound book by Mel Skuld. It is an experience best shared with others. It can be challenging, and I'm particularly grateful to the group that I got to study this with for the last 2 years.
Priscilla, great job. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great.